get that
For
out the
sure.
way. Now, what I want to talk about is before you got the call, you've had a rough couple of years. We know this. We've talked about this many times, but for people that are listening to this for the first time, I kind of want to recap what went on. You were signed by Road FC. What year was that when you first got signed by them? When you were on the TV show?
Yeah, it was 2017. It was 2017.
Okay, so in 2017, you were signed. You went on a reality show, right? They brought you in, and you were in another country. It's kind of like, you love doing that. You love going to new countries, right? You love going to new places and experiencing the training that they have. When you look back at your experience with Road, because I know that, you fought once after the show, you were successful. I remember the knees. The knees were very important in that fight that you had at, I think, Road XC Double X. I think it was December of 2017, or was it? Yeah, 2017, right?
Yes. Correct.
Okay. All right. So after that fight, you went and started training in Phuket, and you had your second fight lined up with Road. And then, like maybe a week or two out, you had a devastating knee injury. Before the knee injury, talk about, kind of recap to us, like the emotions of going to Korea and experiencing that culture, training with those people, and then actually transferring over to Phuket and furthering your career with them.
Sure. Yeah. So I left. Well, you talk about me, always like wanting to travel for training and stuff like that, and that was definitely something that I kind of never really thought about at the beginning of my career when I first started, and I was just in Hong Kong, and I'd fought 4 times, kind of back to back. But I'd won my first 2 fights, then I'd lost my second two, and I realized that there's something that needed adjustment, and because the sport just isn't so developed in Hong Kong yet, and we don't really have much infrastructure for it, and I guess just in China in general, it's difficult to find teams that are larger than 4 or 5 that are actually pro. And a lot of people travel long distances just to get a training session in with like different people and things like that. And so I knew that I'd achieved a certain level, and I was sort of a striker that kind of had a little bit of grappling, but I didn't have anything that brought it all together. I didn't have any wrestling. I didn't have any transitions, and that's what cost me my 2 losses, along with some other things as well. And so, kind of looking at what I could control, I figured something needed to change, and then Road FC came to Hong Kong for this open workout type thing, and I met with the CEO at the time. And what he offered was not to sign me, but for me to come train for a month, fully sponsored. And of course, I kind of jumped at the opportunity. Korea is known for their MMA. They've got this, Road FC's been running for a few years already, and they're known to put on pretty good shows. And so I went over there, and I was learning so much. They're definitely a lot more developed in MMA, but just language and culture I couldn't quite keep up with. And because I was still learning a lot, I just wanted to stay and continue learning. And so they were like, well, we'll continue to sponsor you if you do this reality show, that I was like super reluctant to do. But then I was like, okay, if that's going to up my chances to get signed, then why not? I'm going to do it. And so I did that. And then afterwards they were like, okay, we're going to put you in the show that we have in December, and sign you, but we can't sponsor you anymore. And I was like, okay, that's fine. But I was already at the time training with an MMA team in Seoul, and I figured, well, I'd already been training with them and I'm still learning from them. Maybe I should just do my camp here. And in hindsight, I feel like I definitely should have just gone to Phuket at that moment, because it would have been a more suitable training environment for me. But I was kind of like, well, I'm in Korea trying to promote Korean MMA, and I'm one of the few foreigners here. Like, maybe that will set me apart from everyone else. And so I thought that was kind of the path. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to stick it out here in Seoul. And it ended up being like the toughest camp of my life. Definitely just, not being able to speak English to many people, because like my coaches and teammates didn't speak English. The living situation was like pretty uncomfortable and a little gritty. At the time, I didn't really think much of it, because I was like, oh, yeah, I should be living in a basement, and I should be like, grinding it out and like living a tough life. And I ended up not being able to recover, just being overly stressed all the time. And, the weather was really cold. And so it'd be like negative 12 degrees. And we were training at a gym with no heating. And so I could have actually, now that I think about it, it's like I should have gotten injured then. If there was ever time to get injured, like that should have been the time because I just wasn't properly recovered. I was training too hard. Like we sparred every single day. And so, I got by with the win at that Road FC at the end of that year. And, it was then I realized like I want to take my camp elsewhere. And so, was very happy for that experience to personally develop. But I felt like in terms of on the technical side, it was more like development of my will as like a fighter and like my grit, but it wasn't so much development in sort of technical aspect, although there was a little bit. And then it wasn't until I got to Phuket early the next year, started training under Eric Uresk at Phuket Top Team, that I really started to develop and really started to learn and really started to bring up my grappling. And he had me, I've been striking for 15 years. So he had me take my focus away from that and just almost purely on the wrestling and jiu-jitsu for a period of time. And that showed a lot of improvement in that area because I'd been stuck into that, for, well, for that period of time, that first part of that year. And then I was supposed to fight, in May in this Road FC card in Beijing. So it was like a really stacked card. They had like the heavyweight Grand Prix. They had Gabby Garcia fight on it as well. And I was supposed to fight this Japanese opponent. And 2 weeks away, I got injured. And it was this like heavily anticipated, like super hyped up, their biggest card in China at the Cadillac Arena in Beijing. And yeah, I just pushed really hard in sparring and dislocated my kneecap. And then that was kind of the end of that. And then I got surgery about a month or two afterwards. So that whole period was kind of, everything just kind of came to a screeching halt, the momentum that I'd possibly built up. I spent a lot of time, so obviously went back home to recover and do my rehab. And so that period was definitely, it kind of, I've always put this sort of time, and Eric always like had me address this. So this is the biggest thing that he says is my biggest weakness, actually, that I put this time constraint on my career, and I'm always like, well, because of my age, like I need to fight 3 times, 4 times a year. Like I need to be able to, squeeze as much as I can into this short period of time because I don't have much time left. And because I had this sort of time constraint in my mind, in my subconscious, it kind of affected my training too, and maybe even made it caused me to push harder than I should have in times where I should have rested, and made me sabotage myself. And so, super depressed, like was just kind of went off the rails emotionally, got pretty unfit, like just, it's kind of like, what are you going to do? You have 6 months until you can do anything anymore. Like, you're not going to be like eating chicken breasts and vegetables, right? Like, you're just going to go, whatever. Yeah, I'm going to drink this. I'm going to eat that. I'm going to, just do anything that'll make me feel a little better. And so, I was lucky enough to have had a really good procedure done by a really good surgeon. I had really good physiotherapists back me up, offered to sponsor me at home. And so, I focused on that rehab and that kind of comeback like it was my job, like my life depended on it, basically, and I think it really also showed me kind of a lot of clarity with like why I do what I do and like, the heartbreak of that injury. And that was really my biggest fear, actually, even before it happened. When Eric asked me like, what is your greatest fear? And I said, getting injured again. This has happened before, but it wasn't as big of a deal then. And I said, getting injured again, fucking up my knees, and not being able to fight and sitting out for a year because I don't have that kind of time. And lo and behold, it just fucking happened exactly like that, And so I think it's kind of life's way of like teaching you lessons that you have not yet learned, or like making you face things that you just are too afraid to like face. And so it was just a very sobering experience having to be like, real with myself and just be really honest with like why I do what I do and if this is really what I want and what I'm willing to go through and if I'm willing to go through another injury because let's be real, like this kind of shit happens all the time. Like look at Dominic Cruz too. Like it was back to back knee injuries and then it was like now it's a shoulder injury, like, and you kind of have to think about like you know like how long can I keep doing this for? And some people are lucky and they don't get injured at all and some people just like have this, it's like one after another, and it's such an unpredictable sport and industry that you just never know. We never know when your day will come. And then having to know that I want to make it back there and I want it more than anything else, and I have to be ready for when it does happen again, because in reality, like it's entirely possible. And so I got better. 6 months later I was cleared to fight, and so I went back to road being like, hey, let's get this going, like I want to fight early 2019. And they were like, well, we have this double X card in December, so it would have been a year after the last time I'd fought. And they said, why don't you get on that? And I was kind of like, well, I'm not really ready for that yet because it was 2 months out. But I was like, I'll be ready for one in January, February. And they were kind of pushing me to like do this December one that I felt was like a little odd that they did. And then when I was finally like, no, I can't, do this. And they're like, okay, fine. And then I reached them early this year, and they were like, well, we don't have any events for you actually for indefinitely. So we can't tell you when we can place you in an event. So what we're going to do is let you cancel the contract if you would like to, because we don't feel that it's fair to hold you. And so I was like, all right, sure. Like, let's cancel it. Because I was like, well, I can't be inactive for that long. Like, I got to get something. I haven't fought in over a year. I got to get something in quarter one, And then, so they released me, and then I kind of just continued training. I got to Phuket, November of last year, and I was there for 2 months, just as like a comeback, kind of just to get back into the swing of things and not go at 100%. Ended up fighting in a jiu-jitsu tournament and a Muay Thai fight, like a local show, and that went really well. And so I was, ready to come back for a full camp January. And then, so between January and now, basically, I was, kind of bouncing around promoter to promoter, trying to ask them if they had any shows, if I could fight, if they had any fights for me at bantamweight, they can match me up. And then things just kept coming up and then falling through, coming up and falling through. And, I had a couple of promotions. I thought I was going to do this like short notice fight in Australia. And then something happened with the matchmaker. And then my coach and manager were like, it seems kind of sketchy and like things weren't organized. And so they kind of were like, let's not do that for right now. So, kind of a strategic decision. And I'd also spoken to one championship, and I was kind of like, oh, maybe this might be the thing, Asian promotion, and I'm from Hong Kong. They don't really have any representatives. And they were basically like, oh yeah, we'll take you, but if you fight at flyweight. And I'm like, well, I'm a bantamweight, not saying that it'd be impossible for me to drop to fly, but I would maybe be able to do that once a year, and who knows what kind of long-term effects I would have on, my body and like hormonal levels and whatever. And they were like, well, if you can't make it to flyweight, then this discussion is over. And so I was kind of like, whoa, like, is my, the fact that I'm just like a bigger girl, like I'm a bigger, like I'm 5'8", right? And I've got like a pretty like wide frame. So it's like, is my body type and like my size that's what's holding me back from making it in Asia when, I'm Asian and I grew up here and I started training here. It's like, I should be getting opportunities here. So then, all these things came up and then fell through, and I was feeling like it was kind of just feeling kind of discouraged, to be honest, but I still kept training, still kept working my ass off. Eric never took pity on that ever, because he was like, well, things will happen as they should. Just keep working. Like, what do you have control over? It's just what's in front of you. You don't get to decide which matchmaker gets you to fight in what show. And so we, kept on working, and then he was going to leave at the end or in the beginning of June. And so I thought, well, damn, if Eric's going to leave, maybe I should check out the US. And I was actually, before getting this call, from the UFC, like I was ready to actually go over to California and spend like a couple months to 3 months out there, you know, because I went to college out there, so I had friends who had a place for me to stay, and financially it wouldn't have crushed me too much, and I would have been able to kind of, you know, make ends meet. And so I thought, well, maybe this might be an option, and maybe there might be, you know, opportunities for me there because the girls out there are more closer to my size. And that was basically the plan. You know, I was gonna go over to LA and scope it out, and then see if that might be a logical move for me to make. And then my teammate was like, "Hey, my coach Dean is moving to Shanghai. He got offered a position at UFC PI, and he's looking for Chinese fighters. And you know, they're taking in like resumes and like profiles right now. So you know, I'll put yours forward, and we'll see what happens." He did that. Like literally a few days later, Dean called me and was like, "Hey, we want to invite you to this combine we're having mid-June. You know, I'll get our fighter coordinator to sort you out with your tickets and, you know, reservations and whatever, but and extend you the official invitation, but kind of here's what it's going to be about," and kind of gave me like a brief overview. And I was like, all right, great, cool, let's do that. And so yeah, and then I dropped the US plans entirely, and then, you know, packed my bags and came out here. I not knowing if I was only going to be here for the combine and then get cut after 10 days, or I was going to stay for 6 months and make it onto the team. So, you know, I packed my big ass bag and then was like ready for whatever happened. And thankfully I made it. So here I am.